Welcome into the Irish NFL show, and welcome into Carmen Vitali returning to the show for, I can't remember anymore, Carmen. You've been with us so many times. And Fox Sports, Marquee Network, doing very well for yourself. I'm just reflecting on the time, Carmen, when you first joined the show, all those years ago back in the COVID period, and you're working extensively for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they went on the road to victory and winning the Super Bowl in Tampa. And here we are. I know you're a Bears fan. You're from Chicago. You have to keep your unbiased hat on. But how exciting is it to see a Bears team finally going to come back into the equation? What a job by Ben Johnson. And obviously the win last weekend and a huge weekend ahead.
Yeah, I think last weekend, I was at that game, and I've seen a lot of these Bears comebacks in person, right? 7 total this year, including the postseason in the fourth quarter. And it was one of those things where I was like, all right, but it's the playoffs. Like, things are different in the playoffs. The margin for error is smaller in the playoffs. I spent all week talking about how you can't get down to teams and expect to crawl out of a hole because it's the playoffs. And the Bears showed us that it just didn't matter. It was very interesting just to kind of see the culmination, or it's been very interesting to see the culmination of how Ben Johnson has turned this entire franchise around. And it's something that, I grew up watching this team as a kid and really starving. The city's been starving for success. And you're right. Honestly, there's a lot of parallels to what I experienced in Tampa, where that was also a franchise that had not a lot of success. I mean, I had joined the organization in 2016. If we're doing the 2016 social media trend right now, like where were you 10 years ago? I was starting my job with the Buccaneers, and those first seasons did not go well. I was there for back-to-back 5 and 11 seasons. It was, I always joke that the Bucs were the redheaded stepchild of the league. And it was because they just didn't have a whole lot of success. And then in comes Bruce Arians. A year later, in comes Tom Brady. And all of a sudden, you get this kind of culture changer that makes the whole organization believe, and it changes everything. It changes your attitude. It changes what you think is possible. And even though the Bucs had the talent when Tom Brady got there, I mean, he got some, high profile free agents like his boy Gronk to come. And all of a sudden, the roster, the team, the players are believing like, hey, Tom chose us. Why can't we do this? And then you've got the coaches that are reinforcing all of that. And the entire organization just kind of carries themselves differently. And I've seen a lot of that with the Chicago Bears, with Ben Johnson coming in and really his relationship with Caleb Williams has just blossomed. And you realize they have a very similar mentality to each other. That is not indifferent from, or not that different from what Tom Brady, or what I experienced with Tom Brady, just kind of that, motivated out of spite, manufacturing slights and using that as fuel. And I think this game against the Packers last week, you saw Caleb Williams get really animated on the sidelines, really frustrated because the team wasn't executing. And I think that was a sign of his leadership and how much he's come into being a leader on this team, despite the fact he's only in his sophomore season, despite the fact that last year didn't go well and that he's still developing himself. But I think finally, instead of being along for the ride with Ben Johnson's offense, he's now in command of it and he can kind of demand those things. And I think we're only going to see that, as the years progress with Caleb Williams. But it's been really cool to be really up close with two organizations that have really kind of changed things around in a very short amount of time, for that matter.
Yeah, I know you do a fantastic job covering the NFC North. I'm glad you even brought it back to the Bucs, because I know it was quite different in terms of it's comparable in the sense of the relationship building. You touched on there, a head coach and a quarterback. And Arians was on a different space in terms of his career, where he was as a head coach, and Brady obviously was on the back end of his career. It's a very different dynamic. Ben Johnson's first year as a head coach, Caleb Williams, as you touched on there, second year. The Packers' victory a couple of weeks back, not in particular the one last weekend, where in the press conference after the game, this was kind of the moment I felt it really struck home, where he said, I trust Ben Johnson. I trust working for Ben Johnson. I love this coaching staff. They seem to have ultimate confidence to call a play like they did with a DJ Moore walk-off touchdown in overtime. The fact that they came back so late in the game and it looked like they did nothing essentially for 4 quarters. It was kind of comparable again to last week's game. They did nothing for the entirety of the first half. People are questioning going for it on 4th down. Is it suicidal play calling? Still come back, find the way. It's an amazing evolution. And the Connor who interviewed you previously is a big Bears fan. You touched on it at the time. so many Bears fans in Ireland. It's such an exciting time. But it just goes to the nature of this division, because last year we were here and we were talking about the Lions and the Vikings playing each other, stick out home field advantage. As it played out, neither of them went to the Super Bowl. The Lions are beaten in the divisional round, and a year later, neither of which are in the playoffs. The Packers are gone. It's amazing how quickly a new head coach can come in, and the dynamics of the organization can change so quickly.
Yeah, it's so funny because every year we have this changeover, right? Like half the teams in the playoff field are new each year. But like going into the next season, you can't really imagine how things are going to be that different. And it happens every single year. And I remember, before the season started, looking at the NFC North being like, this is about to be probably the toughest division in football. And I think you could still make that case. I think that the NFC West will probably give you a run for your money too at this point. But I didn't see, the Lions with all of their injuries and there was bound to be some attrition with the amount of coaches that they lost. But even then, they were still fighting for a playoff spot till the very end. And then the Vikings, I don't want to give up on JJ McCarthy yet. I don't think that's fair. We need to give more patience to these quarterbacks. But I'll tell you what, I really was kind of trying to prep Bears fans for this not to look very good in the beginning. I kept saying, in training camp, especially because I was there watching things look so disoriented, and Caleb Williams did not look good in training camp. This offense didn't look good in training camp. And I was like, yeah, well, when Ben Johnson took over as offensive coordinator in Detroit in 2022, they started 1-6. So and then they came on strong and they finished the season strong. They kept the Packers out of the playoffs that year, just purely out of spite. It was all it all worked out, but I was trying to prepare Chicago fans for this might not look good in the beginning. And I could not have been more wrong. The weird thing is it didn't really look good, but they found ways to win regardless. And if you can win while you're developing, I think that's so indicative of a staff and a team that are all on the same page. Every time we talk to these players in the locker room or at a press conference podium, they are echoing the same things that Ben Johnson is telling us. And Ben has been pretty transparent with us as far as head coaches go throughout the season too. In his first stint as head coach, you wouldn't blame him.
He's very open in his press conference.
He's very open, right? You wouldn't blame him too. If he wanted to kind of to keep to himself a little bit, it's his first shot at the head job. That couldn't have been more different. And he's just changed so much intangibly about the culture in Chicago, on top of also changing a lot of stuff on the field, obviously. And I couldn't have seen this coming. I couldn't have seen the Bears in the divisional round. Like I said, even that Packers game in the wild card, I was like, it's cool, it's the Packers, but it's also they really know you, so it's probably not going to go well for you. And Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams make me keep eating my words.
Yeah, you touched on there in terms of the topsy-turvy world of the NFL in terms of teams that have come out of nowhere. You touched on no season is ever different, is ever the same. And the Commanders have had a series of injuries this year, so Commanders fans would argue maybe we would have done a lot better. But they were in the NFC Championship game last year against the Eagles, two NFC East teams, and obviously it hasn't transpired that they've come back in the same manner. But it's just to the point there, very different seasons. And a day in which, as a Giants fan, I'm extremely pleased with the news that we've announced, well, not formally announced, John Harbaugh. Again, the first question from a Giants fan to me this morning was expectations. And I said, he's going to build a culture there. This is going to be a huge change for all the Giants fans, the organization. Why can't we not be back next season? Look at the Bears. Look what they've done under Ben Johnson. This is the question I've got for you on Ben Johnson. During the week, he kind of doubled down on his comments around how much he dislikes the Packers. And I know he's probably playing up to the Chicago fan base to kind of really kind of hit home and much they love him as a head coach. And he's saying all the right things. And even after the game last weekend, where are you on that? Because it was a very difficult defeat for the Packers fans, and they're taking it very badly. I know a lot of Packers fans. And he comes off, I felt like, just shake his hand in the manner LaFleur I refer to, in terms of, you've won the game. Just do. But obviously there's no love lost there, and then he doubles down during the week. Where are you with that? Do you think he should hold back slightly in terms of creating a buzz for next season where Packers are going to come back saying, we want to right the wrongs of last season and we're going to prove it wrong to you? Or am I getting carried away with that?
No, It's interesting because I mean I always say that this is the best rivalry in the major four American sports because I don't want to speak for Premier League. I don't want to speak for anything across the pond because I know how bad those rivalries can get. But I do think that we don't have a whole lot of that in the NFL, and it makes sense because coaches get hired and fired, players are traded, players are released. Like you never know what team you're going to end up on, so it's kind of hard to really maintain some of these rivalries that may be between the fans, but like you're all a coaching brotherhood, you're all a playing brotherhood. So how do you go against that? And I think, listen, I am also the type that is motivated out of spite. I have a petty little heart, and that's why I love Ben Johnson. I've loved Ben Johnson since I started covering him in Detroit in 2022. But I really think that this is something that's important to the fabric of who the Bears are. When George McCaskey, who is the chairman of the Chicago Bears, when he sits down and doing these like head coaching interviews or whoever, honestly, when he sits down with whoever, the Packers come up. This is like, we hate the Packers. We need to beat the Packers. There is like the goal of Super Bowl for the Chicago Bears. And then goal 1B, like that's 1A. 1B is just beat the Packers. And then we're happy. And that's what this rivalry has been because these are the two oldest teams in the league. They have played each other the most of any two teams. So I really honestly love it because it helps the attitude of the team kind of permeate throughout the fan base. And like, this is a very public way of getting the fans riled up. And listen, there's always going to be a little bit extra juice when these two teams play each other just because of the history. And because, especially from Chicago's perspective, it's been very lopsided. So to have a reason to talk mess and talk smack is new for Chicago Bears fans. And it's really exciting that their coach is getting in on it. To me, I know that it's a little unorthodox, but I personally think
it's great to see. As you said, Gavin, who's the fan base. When Connor, who's the Bears fan, was doing the instant reaction Sunday morning Irish time. The game didn't finish till 20-5 in the morning last Saturday, so Sunday was a very slow day for us. But Connor was doing the instant reaction on Sunday morning, and he referred to being in London last year when we were covering the Bears Jags game, which the Bears won comprehensively. But he talked about the Bears fans in the crowd cheering derogatory songs referring to the Packers, and he was going to go,
Packers.
We're winning a game here. We're compelling in the performance, but yet the Packers are still living rent-free in our heads. So I suppose in a way, it's probably fitting that it's coming around again. And of course, the Bears fans are going to enjoy this moment. I'm trying to pump the brakes because as great it is to beat them in a wildcard game, what will that mean on Monday if they go out in the divisional round? Some Bears fans, when they take time out after a season, would say, this has been a fantastic season. We've gone to the divisional round. But we had Adam Rank on last week, and he said, when you're on the 13th green at the Masters and you're winning, you're kind of saying, well, forget about just being pleased to be here. Let's go all the way. And it kind of feels like that for the Bears. They're going into this game against a Rams team that have been touted as the best team in the league for a period of time, and it's kind of dropped off slightly. What's your initial thoughts of the game on Sunday? Sunday night. I'm not necessarily looking for a selection, but just, do you think this is a good fit? I feel like it's a good fit for them to play the Rams as opposed to whether they had the Eagles won last weekend, because I feel the Eagles are more battle-tested to come into Soldier Field and win this game. I'm not entirely sure the Rams team are going to be conducive to the weather in which we're going to see in Chicago.
Yeah, that's the big question. I was kind of asking some guys around the league too, like how much credence should we really be giving to Matthew Stafford not being able to play in cold weather? And all of the guys that have played that I've talked to, or they're just kind of like, I don't really buy into that. Cold is cold, but like adrenaline takes over and you don't really notice it. And we don't really buy into, and I know Matt Stafford's stats in cold weather kind of speak, but I do think that Matt Stafford himself is battle tested and weathered. And this is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. This is a guy that Caleb Williams himself grew up watching and idolizing. And I mean, he is one of the best to ever do it. And he is probably the best doing it currently. Now that it looks like Aaron Rodgers is out. But the thing about Matthew Stafford that scares me, or that should scare you if you're a Bears fan, I think, is just how well he can read defenses, how well he knows what he's looking at, how fast he can process that. This is a guy that has a 2.8 second time to throw average. And he knows how to make those decisions. And he also is paired with a play caller that is kind of a tastemaker in the NFL for offense, right? We talk about Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay as guys. I mean, they're responsible for about half the offensive play callers in the league right now when you talk about their tree and who has come from their staffs and all of that. So it's an offense that keeps evolving. And you talk about the motion and the window dressing that the Rams do and how that can kind of catch you off guard. I'm not necessarily worried about that because the Bears offense themselves does that. And the Bears defense does have to go against the Bears first team offense in practice for a period. That's something Ben Johnson does. That isn't necessarily totally normal. A lot of teams don't do that, but it's what concerns me is just little things that Sean McVay has started to do that it's pushing offense forward. Like he is very much team tight end, right? He deploys 13 personnel, those three tight end sets at an astronomical rate. 30.5% of their offensive snaps are out of that personnel grouping, and tight ends provide just the most insane mismatches for defenses, right? And then if you put multiple on the field, how do you defend them? Do you put a linebacker on them? Well, some linebackers are too slow. Do you put a safety on him? Well, a 6-foot safety on a 6'5" tight end, that might not go well for him either. And then you put multiples of those guys on the field, not to mention pre-snap, you don't know what a tight end is doing. Sure, some of them have tells and that kind of stuff, but as a defender, if you're assigned that tight end, you have to sit back and wait to see, are they releasing into a route? Are they part of the blocking scheme? Is it a run? Like it presents so many challenges for a defense, and for a Bears defense that is still very flawed. I'm very concerned with how they're going to deal with this particular personnel grouping when Sean McVay deploys it, because he's going to do it. And he has the personnel to do it. So I'm very interested to see how that goes. I think this could be a pretty high scoring game as a result. And it's just going to be a matter of the Chicago Bears offense and Caleb Williams keeping up and not getting in that hole that we've seen so many times before, because I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how you come back against this Rams team, especially with that front seven.
Yeah. Actually, I was just going to say, in league where a lot of teams can't find one tight end, they have Higby, Parkinson, Ferguson, and he can explore all three of them to come with these huge plays. I was just going to go there, actually, just what you touched on there. The Bears have had so many heroic comebacks over the course of the season, and even last week, another joyous occasion at the end for all the fans. You kind of get the sense that this is one of those games where I think the Rams defense is, with the exception of, for some reason, when they play the likes of the Panthers, this just seems to be a bit of a mismatch. But by and large, over the course of the season, their defense for me is, I wouldn't say it's underrated, but it kind of goes under the radar because, Stafford and McVay and the offensive schemes kind of takes the leading stories. But I don't find myself looking at it kind of going, if the Bears get into a situation where they're trying to rally from 10 points, 13 points down in the second half on Sunday, they'd have enough to overcome that. Is that your concern? Like, I don't want it to find myself thinking it's going to go toe to toe and it's kind of ding dong where we're going to be looking at a 31-28 game. I don't know whether the weather's conducive to that type of game. But is that a concern that the Bears put themselves in that hole and it's just too big a hole to get themselves out of this time around?
Yeah, I mean, that front seven is the Rams' strength on that defense. They can get, you can attack them on the outside and with those outside corners, and I think that's what the Panthers did so well. Is kind of attacking downfield, attacking to the outside. But if you hold the ball at all, if you kind of give them the opportunity, you have guys like Jared Verse and guys that are so incredibly good up front that can get pressure. And their get off, their speed, the athleticism, the way the pocket collapses when you're playing the Los Angeles Rams it's fast. You do have a quarterback in Caleb Williams that can escape with the best of them, and that can be very defeating for defensive linemen in particular, because you think you have him dead to rights and all of a sudden he spins out and uses that towards his momentum and somehow gets that ball off. And that's going to be what's needed. You're going to need to make some quick decisions, but I do really think that if the Bears can control the game on the ground, not only with the weather, but just in general, keeping that time of possession, not giving Matthew Stafford a ton of time, a ton of possessions, because you're holding the ball. Ben Johnson himself talked about it this week, how the run game as of late hasn't been where they want it to be. And if you go back and look at the run pass splits over the last couple of weeks, it's been more like 65-70% throwing, which is not what Ben Johnson wants to do. It's not what the Bears were doing even before that. it was a very even split with the run kind of even edging out passes. And I think that's what you want to stick to. That's what you want to get back to, because of the fact that you are going to need to just eat up clock as much as possible. And I think that can mitigate the rush too. And the play action game is such a huge part of honestly both of these offenses. But with the Bears in particular, with Caleb Williams in particular, it's so crucial, that under center play action game. And it only works if you commit to the run. And Ben Johnson has shown that he's willing to do that even when they're down, even when it's the third quarter, the fourth quarter, or whatever it is. They need to get back to that. Otherwise, I'm very concerned about what this Rams front can do against them.
And they've got a great two-headed monster there to do, which I just want to turn our attentions, conscious of the time that we're delving into this particular game, because there's so many other great conversations to be had around the games this weekend. The NFC West clashes you referred to there in terms of 3 teams going to the playoffs this year. It feels like it's a bridge too far for the 49ers because of the injuries in which they've had. But I said to one of the guys at the weekend, I thought, in terms of 49ers victories over the last 3 to 4 years, I thought that was one of the most successful wins they've had under Kyle Shanahan. He's had some great days, successful days. He's brought them to the Super Bowl. Because of the nature of all the injuries in which they've had, I know Eagles haven't been playing at the same level in which we saw last year when they went on to win the Lombardi. But to go into Philadelphia missing so many players, you lose Kittle so early in the game, it was going to take some trickery plays. Their defense held up, which hadn't held up over the course of the last few weeks. We saw that Sunday night football game against the Bears and how defeated they were that night. People are just assuming this is going to be a Seattle roll them over type again, because they're coming off the bye week, 1 seed, they're at home. Lincoln Field will be a significant help to them. Is that as straightforward as it may seem, or do you really think this is a 49ers team that could up? We're only 2 weeks removed from when they last played each other. Like, it's just so unusual to have these playing each other so close again.
I know, especially when you're playing a division rival. I can't put anything past either of these teams, given that they're so familiar with each other. I mean, that's what happens when you get these divisions that are, super divisions. The NFC West being the super division, sending 3 teams to the playoffs. These guys are going to play each other in the playoffs then, and if they do, all bets are off. I mean, that's the same in the regular season when you have guys that could be in the last place in the division beating the guys that look unstoppable. I'm really interested to see too, because I go back to, that Bears game, they didn't have George Kittle either. George Kittle was injured for that Bears game, and they still, the Niners offense was still able to put up points because they still have Christian McCaffrey. And Christian McCaffrey is just such a dynamic player within Kyle Shanahan's scheme. And Kyle Shanahan is really, really good at adjusting. He's really good at kind of making the most of the personnel he has available and doing things that exploit weaknesses. And it's hard to come up with a weakness for the Seattle defense. Obviously, Mike McDonald's done a tremendous job. And then, you have Sam Darnold in there that is still slinging it. And I'm so incredibly happy for him that it wasn't just because he was in Minnesota, he was doing well, he's kind of like quote unquote fixed, because I've always loved Sam Darnold as a player. And there's a lot, you can't see any obvious holes with this Seattle team. I think they're probably the most complete team in the NFC. But that being said, I keep saying the Bears can't keep coming back. I keep saying, well, the Niners can't keep winning. They're just too hurt. And then they prove you wrong every single time, because Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers in the league. So I really think this is going to be a good game, regardless of if it's high scoring or not. These teams are too familiar with each other. These coaches are now too familiar with each other, and it's going to be a chess match for sure.
Yeah. And of course, by the time the Rams and Bears step on the field on Sunday in Soldier Field, they will be aware of the outcome of that game, so they'll know what's ahead for both of them. I know you don't cover the NFC necessarily the same kind of manner in which you do with the NFC North and teams there, but what's your overall thoughts for this weekend? Because this Texans team, I'll start with the Patriots Texas game, which is 8 o'clock Sunday evening here. Texans team defensively have been just lights out over the past 10 games. And people are saying CJ Stroud had the 4 turnovers on Monday. It's the first time he's turned the ball over in that magnitude this season. Nico Collins is in concussion protocol. They don't have the weapons offensively to go in there and put high points up. And I just said, they don't necessarily have to go in there and put up 20 points. They could, if they can. The Patriots last week offensively, I know it's a week-to-week league at times, but they didn't have a stellar performance against the Chargers. They came out the right side of it. They did really well defensively, but they didn't play the manner in which they've been playing all season under Drake May. And this Texans defense could go in there, hold their own, and put themselves in a position where they win the game, predominantly because of their defense. And all it allows for a number of drives from CJ Stroud. And what's your thoughts going into this? Because it's such a wonderful story as well for the Patriots fans. In similarities to the Bears in terms of how quickly they've turned things around under a new head coach. Is it a bridge too far for the Texans, or do you think they're well within their rights to go and win this game on Sunday?
I think there's a reason that people say defense wins championships, and it's because of the fact that if you can limit your opponent scoring, and you don't need to put up 30 points if you're the Houston Texans offense. That's never been what you've needed to do this season in order to win. I'm borrowing this term from the Athletic Football Show, but the Houston Texans defense is a defense full of goblins, like on every single level. And they are it's the best pass rushing tandem in the league between Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. And then you have guys like Derek Stingley in the back. And it's such a complete unit. And it's such a scary unit. I mean, these guys go a million miles an hour. If you look at how hard they play and how precise they play, the way they swarm to the ball, this is a team. This is a unit that can carry a team to a championship. I have no doubts about that. And if you look at what CJ Stroud has done this year, he's been a little up and down. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's a little PTSD from last year and how many sacks that he took, and the offensive line. The offensive line didn't really get set until the very beginning of the season. We didn't know who was starting on that Houston offensive line until week 1. And I think that there's still some holes. I don't love their center. But I think that guys like Ezra Cleveland, Ed Ingram, those guys, the guards up front, are doing phenomenally well. And I think that they've been a little bit under the radar as how much they've improved. But I do think that CJ Stroud is still kind of, if you look at his footwork in the pocket, it's still kind of like erratic, and he doesn't get set, and he's kind of like ready to take off at any time. And I think he's just uncomfortable still. But the thing is, you have a defense that can make up for that. And the Patriots, I'm fully like, I love Drake May coming out. He was my favorite quarterback of that class. Don't tell anybody here in Chicago. I love Drake May. I would vote, if I had an MVP vote, that would be my vote for MVP, even over Matthew Stafford, just because of Drake May has faced more pressure than Matthew Stafford. Their numbers are very similar, but Drake May has had to work through a little bit more obstacles when it comes to the team around him than Matthew Stafford has. But I don't know that they're there yet. Like, I think next year, like, that's it. Patriots are back. They had like 3 years of having to be somewhat irrelevant, and then that's it. But I mean, they're going to the divisional round of the playoffs, so you can't call them irrelevant this year either. I do think that the Texans can get to, if they can get to Drake May, you can get to, I realize the Patriots defense has done well in this postseason or in the wild card round, but I don't necessarily just trust the overall unit as much as I think I will next year. So I think it's up for grabs. I think it's anybody's game.
Yeah. You'd interestingly talk about the Texans offensive line. Laramie Tunsil traded to the Commanders last year. That was an eye-opener. People couldn't understand at the time why they would go and do that. You said they were in flux at the start of the season. Yeah, here they are in the divisional round. Can you imagine a Bills-Patriots AFC Championship game? We're going to do our preview later on this evening, Irish time, and I'm going to throw out a point about the fact that I wouldn't say everybody's been writing off the Broncos this season. Like, they are the 1 seed. They've had a great season, but people have this kind of sense that it's just they're there to be got at, and when the Jags got at them, they took care of them in Mile High, and the Giants really threw away a game earlier in the season. And time again, this Broncos team have found ways to win games late on with field goals. But you made that point earlier about that actually helps grow a team. It doesn't necessarily have to always be about the performance. If you win these tight games, that evolves into a team that knows how to go and win these games. And they're going to play this weekend, obviously, against the Bills, and everyone is suggesting this is Josh Allen's time. They've come out the right side of it last weekend. What's your thoughts on this one? Because this is kind of, I've this feeling in the back of my mind that on Monday people are going to go, oh, so this is the Broncos that everyone was waiting to see. This Broncos team come out on Sunday, and I wouldn't say spring a surprise because the betting line is reflective of where these teams are. It's a 1-point game. It's very tight to call. But people are assuming that Josh Allen is just going to come in on a crest of a wave, Superman cape like last week, win the game. And I'm not entirely convinced that's going to be the case.
I'm not either. I want it to be the case because I do want it for Josh Allen. I like Josh Allen so much. I like the Bills. And I think, there is something to the fact that you don't have the usual suspects in this. It doesn't mean that the teams are any worse, in my opinion, but when you don't have Patrick Mahomes to get through, when you don't have Lamar Jackson to get through, this is an opportunity. There's no way around that. This is an opportunity for the Bills. But listen, the Broncos, for everything I just said about the Texans defensive unit, the Broncos defensive unit is the same. It's very complete on all three levels. You have a crazy, scary defensive front. And so many of those guys, and so many of those guys that aren't even on the defensive line when you talk about like Zach Allen and stuff, like those are the guys that kind of come in there. The blitz schemes are really fun. They're complex. The stunts that they pull up front and just the way that they dominate it's scary for any offensive line. I have to imagine the Bills offensive line is like, oh God. And not to mention you have to do this at altitude because you're going to Denver. It's going to be it's a tall task regardless. I do think that the Denver offense, they kind of found a little bit more of an identity towards the end of the season. You kind of figured out, all right, trust, like you could see that Sean Payton kind of trusted Bo Nix a little bit more to open some things up for him. The downfield passing game in particular, I think had been missing at one point in the season that had finally, like, all right, yeah, sling it, Bo. Like just do it. That
performance against the Packers in Mile High, I think about 4 or 5 weeks ago, where they were down by a deficit. They came back. It was more his performance in particular. I thought it was the best performance he's had, rounded performance over the course of the 2 years since he went in. Okay, so that's the Bo Nix that they believe they got here.
Yes, if you get that Bo Nix and you get the defense playing at the level that we've become accustomed to seeing them play at, I really it's going to be tough for the Bills. It really is. But I'm selfish. I don't know. I just I want that for Buffalo. I feel like Buffalo is like, it's such a good sports town, and they just haven't had the success. And you get this like all world quarterback in Josh Allen, and you think, oh my God, this is our time, and they've fallen short time after time. So I'm hoping that this is like their opportunity, because I do think that the Broncos are built to sustain this level of play for a while when you look at like their contract situation and all that kind of stuff. So I don't necessarily think it's like now or never for the Broncos, whereas like it kind of is starting to feel like it's now or never for the Buffalo Bills, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to that too, though.
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation even over the course of the last 2 weeks. If they were to lose, would Sean McDermott be still in situ come next season? It's feels similarity to what we're seeing with the Ravens moving off Harbaugh, Tomlin obviously announcing he's no longer coming back. That kind of, not that they're not a great head coach, but is it a time just to move on and evolve into another coaching staff? Carmen, great weekend ahead. People always suggest this is the best weekend of the season in terms of what we're going to get on the field for compelling games. And I know this is a really busy time for you, so we greatly appreciate you taking time out to come on the Irish NFL show. Thanks as always. You're very conscious.
Thank you guys so much for having me.